What is something we can start doing like today to start easing our way into more regulation and a little bit more embodiment?
The best way to go is unstructured physical movement, unstructured, non-focused movement
Mm-hmm.
allows the system to right itself.
Yeah.
If we are not connected to our own inner landscape, we cannot connect to somebody else's landscape. We don't necessarily look at, how embodied or disembodied people are when we actually give them therapy. I think it's very important to me to understand that if we don't take that into account as counselors and therapists, we're actually not able to do our job properly. And I figured that out very, very early on, because when we look at the subconscious and then we look at the body, there are two aspects that are very, very important when we talk about therapeutic intervention and beyond just good living.
So welcome to the Michelle Chalfant Show, Michaela Boehm.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. I'm really excited to have you on today to speak about all things intimacy, embodiment, and wherever else we go. We really need you right now in the world because I was just sharing with you, it feels like we're becoming, is it true that we're becoming more disembodied than ever? Yeah. And I know this is your specialty. So let's dive right in. You know what I like? I'd love to get a little bit of your backstory though. Before we dive into that, I do want to go into embodiment, but how did you become so interested in this work?
Oof, that's a longer story than we have time for. But the Cliff Note version is that I, from a very young age, on was 12, essentially knew that I wanted to be in this field.
Yeah.
And of course, you don't know with 12 what I know now. But I was very interested always in both the psychological aspects, and that's my background. I'm, Jungian psychologist, trauma therapist, amongst some other things. But also the somatic aspect was something that I was always really, really interested in, and how the body supports us or doesn't support us when it comes to not only relationship, but in general, living a life that's not just about surviving, but thriving, essentially, which, as you were asking, is it becoming harder and harder to do that? And I think it is.
Yeah.
But even back then when I started, which is quite a while ago by now, that was something to consider, because in general, when we look at therapy, and that since
Mhm.
so your field, we don't necessarily look at, how embodied or disembodied people are when we actually give them therapy.
Right.
And I think it's very important, and it was always very important to me to understand that if we don't take that into account as counselors and therapists, we're actually not able to do our job properly. And I figured that out very, very early on, because one of the very heavy, let's say, weighted aspects of my training was subconscious work as well, within the context of trauma therapy, and how do you work with a traumatized body in ways that doesn't re-traumatize or reopen certain things. And so when we look at the subconscious and then we look at the body, there are two aspects that are very, very important when we talk about therapeutic intervention and beyond just good living.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that, because I know traditionally, because I've been a therapist 25 years,
So have I.
long time.
Oh, long time.
But I mean, when I went through my training way back when, very long time ago, there wasn't talk about embodiment. Again, when I went through training, there was no internet. So I didn't even know about Peter Levine back then. Yeah. And I remember going through somatic experiencing, the beginning training of that. And I was so blown away. I was like, well, we've never talked about this before, and how important it was. I remember watching people demoing in front of us, in front of the room. I was like, wow, who knew that this was the way you could actually work with somebody using the body? Because we weren't taught that. So we've come a long way, thank goodness, because we need to incorporate the body. So talk about that. Like, what's going on right now in our world as far as we're living is probably such more disembodied now than ever. Would you say yes to that? what's happening, I mean, to our world right now?
Well, that I think is too big of a question
I
to.
know.
But when we talk about embodiment and disembodiment and why is it important to be embodied, right? Then that's kind of where I sit in my work. I kind of sit on the intersection of embodiment and relationship. And with
Yeah.
that, of course, pleasure and sexuality, but also performance and high performance, and what that actually means.
Yeah.
And what we're looking at and the way I teach it, not only to my clients, but the people I train, is essentially we are very, very well designed energy machines, right, as human beings, meaning our bodies are actually designed to direct and use energy optimally because we have a limited amount of energy based on the fact that the cortex of our brain can only emit so much per second. And that's what runs our body. So without, people can get quite woo-woo about energy and stuff like that. I'm actually talking electrical energy emitted from the cortex of the brain and then jumping onto neural pathways and making us not only live, but also, act out and survive and all of those kind of things. And so we look at how that works. We of course know how to do this without consciously needing to do it. Our body's built for survival, but and this is the important piece. Our body's also built to thrive, and people forget that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The sympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system work together so that there is always the balance of surviving and thriving, and one doesn't work without the other. And we are built to have huge spikes of, let's say, nervous system arousal, followed by huge spikes of reset and rejuvenation and thriving. And our system knows how to do that. We don't actually have to hack it or force it, so to speak, if we can do what I call in my work rewilding, in the sense that we are coming back to the nature of the body. So that all said, this is just a bigger setup to say our body is essentially used to pulling energy from where it's not needed to use it where it's needed, because we have a finite amount per second. We're not computers where you can update the RAM endlessly. We have to essentially make do with what's available. Our body's built for that. So for instance, right now, you and I are not only looking at the top part of our body, but we're acting from the top part of our body, meaning we're thinking, we're speaking, we're looking, we're focused, we're having a conversation that starts somewhere and goes somewhere, hopefully.
Yes. Yeah.
What it means is, I call it the go, right? So because that's devoid of any misgendering or things like that, right? It's the go, meaning men and women have it. Anybody who has a nervous system has it, meaning we know where we're going and we're going there, right? And so the go happens up here. It's the brain, it's the cognitive function, it's the speaking, it's the directing, it's the thinking. And so all the energy goes to where it's needed, which is up here. Often people call that we're too much in our heads, or, I need to get back into my body. I'm too much in my head. That's what that is. You're using the energy where it's needed. Where is it not needed?
Below in the body.
Right? We're parked in a chair, both of us.
Yeah.
There's minimum, now there's, of course, body functions and stuff like that, but there's minimum needed in our lower bodies. So our body naturally pulls the energy from where it's not needed to where it's needed. And energy follows attention. You always hear that, right?
Always. Yeah.
That is how it goes. So now that's not an issue by itself. However, we're also creatures of habit, meaning everything we do has been installed by repetition. And so our neural pathways have been installed by doing something over and over and over. And the thing we do the most is the biggest pattern. So if we spend a lot of time in go, then that's our biggest pattern. And if you don't spend a lot of time in flow, what is flow? Flow is essentially feeling and being in the lower body with both, let's say, aliveness, vitality, pleasure, intuition, the functions needed for reproduction, right? Feed and breathe is what they sometimes call rest digest, right?
Yes.
And a lot happening when we do go. Now, in a healthy, adjusted nervous system, you
Mhm.
can easily go between go and flow
Yeah.
because both are available. But of course, if you have massive go patterns and not so much flow patterns, I always liken this to a bodybuilder who skipped leg day.
Yeah.
Um, like very, very strong up here
Yeah.
and muscle down below. And then
Yeah.
that's why people don't have a lot of sexual desire and they're, and so on and so on and so on.
Ooh,
So
that's a
that
good
that
point.
that all said, why are we so disembodied? Well, because we don't need our body an awful lot throughout our go life. And there's an
Yeah.
awful lot of go, right? And there's
Mhm.
driving and there's public transport and there's sitting and there's computers and there's devices and there's the phone and then, so and of course we have an epidemic of not moving enough, right?
Mhm.
And meaning they, I don't know, hourly even, not even
Yeah.
daily.
No, you're right. We're sitting on Zoom all the time.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, this is how we live our lives. We're on Zoom or we're on a phone or we're not moving.
Right. And so all of that is the reason why we're more disembodied than ever. Now there's other reasons. I slice the embodiment and the barriers to embodiment in three ways, simply so it's easier for me to teach to people. And
Yeah.
so there are arbitrary slices that are, that's kind of my work. It's not, the truth or something. It's
Yeah.
just my work.
Yeah.
So the three major barriers to embodiment are stress and anxiety, which
Okay.
of course we have lots of,
Yeah.
meaning there's a lot of external stimulus, there's a lot of internal stimulus, there's a lot of information coming at us faster than we can actually deal with it. There's a lot of demand. There's a lot of, just like situational stress
Yeah.
that then causes essentially a fight or flight event, also called an anxiety attack,
I
right?
hear the words overwhelm a lot too. Just
Yes.
people are just overwhelmed. Just
Right. Well, that's my second slice.
yeah.
The
So
second slice is overwhelm, overload.
yeah.
I slice it differently because the tools to deal with anxiety and stress are slightly different than overwhelm, overload.
Oh,
Overwhelm, overload is, of course, external stimulus.
yeah.
The other day I went to my car dealership to get my car serviced and I had to wait there because it's an hour from where I live. And there were two different TVs on, both loud. And there was a whole call bank of, customer service people with phones ringing and all talking at the same time. I lasted about, I don't know, 30 seconds. I had to
Yeah.
leave because, I'm not used to that. And ads and big TVs, right? And there was
Yes.
a helper on
Yes.
this one and, whatever. Like, so that's external overload. Internal overload is partly what we just talked about, which is excessive go.
Mhm.
It can also manifest in, let's say, thought loops,
Yeah.
negative beliefs, internal dialogues that kind of go around in circles. All of that is and of course, excessive go. The
Yeah.
reason why anxiety and stress different than overload, overwhelm is that when it comes to overload, overwhelm, we have a very specific pattern that kicks in, which is, and this is important,
Mhm.
more important even for people who have all their, reproductive organs in the lower body. Well, it's all of us, but meaning, need a lot of innervation and blood flow in the lower body. Because what happens is when you're really in go to an extreme extent, is your body tries to squeeze the last bit of energy out of the lower body and bring it up. And so have a tight pelvic floor,
Mhm.
tight genitals, tight butt, belly, solar plexus. So it all gets pulled up and then it pulls up here, neck, shoulders, jaw, head, right? We all know that one. And then it stays here. And that particular clench and upward pull then has some real effects, not only on reproductive and function and health, but also on pleasure available, let's say bandwidth for intimacy and things like that.
Wow.
There's a lot happening there. I know.
Yeah, a lot happening. And I'm thinking about adrenals getting squeezed. When you say going up,
Exactly.
it's like,
Yeah. Everything squeezes. And
yeah.
we see that a lot, of course. And so then the third barrier to embodiment, which is something that we're not going to,
Yeah.
go deeply into it, is trauma.
Yep.
Trauma and acute trauma, so chronic and acute trauma. In its very definition, disembodies you because that's how you survive, right? So
Yeah.
disassociation or disembodiment in the context of a traumatic or potentially traumatic situation is healthy. That's how you get out of it. That's how you fight. That's how you run. You're not that embodied. If you were that embodied, you couldn't do what you need to do. And so people often don't understand that that kind of checking out or dissociating or disembodying in the context of survival is actually necessary and built in. But what's also necessary and built in, which we have arrested, is the flipping over into thriving, meaning the rest and digest after fight or flight. And that often gets arrested, and hence the system can't balance itself.
Whew. Everyone I know fits into one of these three categories.
Yes.
It's like we're stuck on.
Yes.
We're just on all the time. And
Yes.
I think about people that would say, I can't meditate. I can't turn my brain off. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
What do you say to those people which again, I think it's like everyone I know, like I just have such a hard time meditating. I can't turn my mind off. It's always going and I can't, the nervous system is so overstimulated, all kind of like you said, with the TVs on it. It's crazy.
Yeah.
What do you say to these people? Again, there's so much going on right now, but how do we break that cycle? What is something we can start doing like today to start easing our way into more regulation and a little bit more embodiment?
Yeah. Well, meditation is typically not the first thing I would put somebody.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons. That's not to say that meditation isn't good, but meditation as a remedy is limited simply because it's not meant as a remedy, right? Nowadays, we have it that meditation, somehow mindfulness, whatever, right, is a thing that plugs the hole in the boat that needs to be, or let's put it this way, it plugs the hole in the bucket we use to bail out the leaky boat, right?
Yes.
That's pretty much how it's looked at, but it's not
true.
discipline, both a practice discipline and a spiritual discipline for some people. And you're absolutely right. If you're going from 100 miles to meditating, you won't quiet your mind. But if somebody does want to meditate, there are techniques where you don't quiet your mind.
Yeah.
Which is nice. There's a technique by a man named Shinzen Yang. It's called just sitting.
Okay.
It is exactly what it sounds like. And it's amazing. You just sit and you let your mind go wherever your mind wants to go, whenever it wants to go there. And over time, it will settle down. But that's typically not the best way to go from foot on the gas to, to kind of relaxing. The best way to go is unstructured physical movement.
Okay.
Yeah. I developed an entire somatic movement method called the nonlinear movement method. Not the most original name because, of course, when I developed it, I didn't know it was going to get big, but something I did for my patients and in the clinic I ran and things like. But essentially, non-linear, meaning unstructured, non-focused movement allows the system to right itself. So that could be something, it could be as simple as putting on a song and just moving your body however your body wants to move. Not dancing, but moving your body however your body wants to move. It could be going for a walk and laying down on the grass and rolling around for a moment if there's grass and something, or walking barefoot, just being your feet a bit and, picking some stuff up with your feet. If you want the energy to go from the head down, you need to engage the lower body. That's, I think, no secret to any.
Definitely.
So things that involve the lower body, hip circles, light squats that are not too structured, things of that nature, just playing with your children, your animals, a ball. What I do regularly when I have a lot of work to do in a day is I have one of those little spiky plastic balls. I roll it around on my feet while I'm working. Now, things like that, that's how you start. And because we're actually built for that go flow, regulation, the nervous system regulation doesn't take a lot, but you do need to be regular.
Yeah.
So most people make the mistake, once a week they try and meditate for an hour. That's absolutely counterproductive. What you want to do is super short little breaks
Yep.
throughout your day with something that involves the body.
Yeah. I call it micro moments. Take micro moments throughout the day. It just take a few minutes. Something I love to do, which is regulating for me. I live on a lake. So we have this little platform or dock section, and I go out and I sit along the lake.
Yeah.
And the carp, you know what a carp, the fish,
Mhm,
they're like
mhm,
giant.
mhm.
And they float in like 6 inches of water, but they'll come floating by very slowly, one after the next. It is the most regulated thing for me. I just sit and watch them go. My whole body starts moving with the fish in the lake. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so relaxed. But it starts to put me in my body, or I go kayak.
Mhm.
Because to me, in the middle of the day, if I have to stop and meditate, because my business, I go, 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 like most humans now, right? It's hard to just, I can't witness thoughts. I can't do it. So I like that, like moving, doing something like that. I want to shift gears a little bit. So this was beautiful what you said. How does this affect, because we are disembodied, intimacy? Let's
Yeah.
shift into relationship talk now. I want to know from you, as being an expert in this field, what what happens in our relationships if we are living these disembodied or high stress, high overwhelm lifestyles?
Yeah. I mean, we talked a little bit about it earlier in the context of therapy, couples therapy, right? If you are not even in your body, then it's very hard to actually affect any actual conversation, right? But beyond that, beyond therapy, of course, if we are not connected to our body, we can't feel our body and with that somebody else's body. And
Yeah.
a lot of what I work with in the nonlinear movement method is teaching people good interoceptive awareness, meaning the ability to accurately and in the present moment feel their inner landscape. And so
Mm,
the inner landscape is comprised of physical sensations, of emotions, and of the accompanying thoughts. And so
right.
that's how we navigate the world.
Yeah.
If we are not connected to our own inner landscape, we cannot connect to somebody else's landscape.
Ooh,
And
that's good.
how we
Mm,
relate with other people
yeah.
is we feel their body with our body.
Mhm.
And there's mirror neurons, and there's all kinds of things that happen, not only in intimacy, but also in parenting and, in business and everywhere. And you know this from therapy, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I got so good at it because I did so many hours a week that I would be able to tell somebody's, temperature fluctuations through my body just sitting across in a chair because I did 8, 9 sessions a day for many years, right? And so you get so clued into somebody else's body via your body. And
Hmm.
that of course then makes it that you can have good intimacy, not only sexual intimacy, but you can feel your partner's moods. You can actually feel where they need to be touched or if they don't want to be touched.
Mm.
Like all of those things come through the connection with ourselves. And then that allows you to connect with another.
And I'm thinking again about, we live in this, where's my phone? I was going to hold up my phone. We live in this world
Yes.
where we're, again, I call it living chin up, right? So we're living from the headspace, whether we're doing Zoom calls during the day or we're on our phones, we're not enough in the body to pick up on the fact that, hey, something's off with my partner. I can
Right.
feel it.
Right.
I can feel it. Something's not quite right. So I love that you were able to do that with your clients. But as partners, or when we're in partnership, the goal, I would think, if we're that embodied, would be to feel it with our partner. Like, wait, something's off with you. Let's talk about it. Do you need to be touched? Do you need a hug? What's happening?
Right.
And I think it's just, we're missing it. Interesting. So how would I know? Because again, I don't think a lot of people would even guess that they're not that they're in or out of their body. They just might say, "Oh, my intimacy's gone down. I hate having sex. I don't want to do this anymore." What do you say to these people that might say that about their relationship?
Well, I mean, we want to be very pragmatic. Anyone who's had in a length of relationship beyond, let's say, a year,
Mm-hmm.
or sometimes even less, is going to experience fluctuation in desire, let's say, amongst other things, right? Let's not even talk sex per se,
Yeah.
but in desire and in connection. And that has partly to do with the kind of busyness and the kind of disconnect that we have to ourselves and our partners. I came back from Portugal late last night. And so I've been on planes and trains and automobiles for the last 2 days. And in Portugal, in general, now I'm talking in the area where I am at, and that's
Mm-hmm.
very rural. But you don't see people have their phones on their table when they have lunch or dinner,
Wow.
right? You don't see that. And you go into a restaurant and people are actually sitting across from each other and they're having actual conversations and they're eating their food and they're drinking their wine and they're having a good time. And there's a beautiful sunset somewhere happening back there, or some ocean going on or something. You don't see that kind of thing that happens here regularly, which is you see couples on a table and both of them are scrolling through their phones. Well,
Mhm.
that's not going to make you want to have sex. It's
Yeah.
not going to make you want to connect body to body, because you're not connected to your own body. And then, then of course starts the whole thing. Well, my partner should be able to get me out of my head into my body. Yes, sure. But
True.
they're also suffering from the same thing and also tired and also exhausted. So I think the kind of lack of desire and stuff like that is built into the lifestyle. But beyond that
Mm-hmm.
is also, there's other reasons as well that, you know,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the disembodying effect of daily life without the reconnecting with the body and changing up the, let's say, the landscape of the relationship will make it such that there's no break in that day to day. And you can think about it in the sense that if you go on a date with somebody and it's new and exciting, well, one of the reasons why it's new and exciting is because you actually take out the time, you make an effort, you plan something, you go, you go and do something exciting. You go out in nature, you go for a walk, you do things that make it so you get into the body. And then as
Yeah.
time progresses, we no longer do that. We sit on the sofa with our respective phones in the sweatpants with no plan, doing the same
It's
old, same old. And that's
hair
the
on top of the head.
fact. And that's the death of desire, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. You're right. Because when we're dating, you're not on your phone the whole time. You really give
No.
that person 100% of your attention and they give you theirs. And we're all about the other person. What so many people that I know personally even would say something's wrong. I'm not as attracted to them anymore. Something's just not right. I don't know if this person's still for me. Can you talk about the stages of that we go through in relationships? As far as, there's fireworks in the beginning and then things start to die off sometimes after 9 months even. So what are the stages that we go through in relation when we're in relationship with somebody?
Well, I mean, they're slightly different depending on, how people meet and things like that. But typically, the discovery stage is the stage in which you do the exciting, interesting things. You get to know the other person. And in my work, I talk a lot about the essentially attraction between opposites,
Yeah.
right? And the opposites it's not gender specific. It has to do with two people being different, and that difference creates a strong art. And that strong art is the attraction. And then, of course, we've all had this amazing moment. You spent all night, talking about your experiences and your stuff, and you discover similarities, and it's all exciting, and it's really hot, and there's hot sex, and there's all this amazing stuff, right? And then as you discover more similarities, you come closer and closer and closer together. And the closer you come together, the less of a spark there is.
Interesting.
So the further apart you are, the bigger the spark and the stronger the attraction. And the more you come together, the less of that spark is. Now, the real bummer here. But of course, that's not really a bummer. I don't know exactly how to say that the very thing that makes you come closer together means that you're more functional as a couple, right? So
Right.
very often, because relationship, I divide it up in my tradition, the way I was taught. We call it erotic friction. It's an old tantric term, right? So erotic friction requires the attraction of opposites. So it's opposites attract is the recipe for erotic friction, meaning
Yep.
sexual chemistry.
Yep.
Relationship, birds of a feather flock together, is the operative, meaning for a relationship, you need to be on the same page. The better aligned your values, your experiences, your goals are, the better you will function as a couple. So as you come closer together, you are losing that automatic spark, but you're gaining the common values, common goals that allows you to function. Now, the important thing to remember is that, in an average person's life, when you look at the ratio of living life as a couple versus sex goals, it's much more important that you live harmoniously as a couple and you have those similarities. A relationship problem is a problem where you're not on the same page. That's what you need a relationship.
Okay.
That means essentially that, I don't know exactly how to say it. If you can't agree on something, you need relationship counseling. Right?
Okay.
Communication, values, goals, how the kids are raised, money, where is it going next? Those are relationship issues that require that somebody bring you on the same page.
Got it.
Now, the things that bring you on the same page are not the things that make you have hot sex.
Oh, interesting.
Because hot sex actually requires the opposite. It requires the friction of opposites.
Okay.
Now, it's much harder to find somebody with whom you align. So if you are nicely aligned, that's your person. Because the other thing is just chemistry or physics, right? Meaning you can make yourself different at will when you want to have sex. Not
Yeah.
that hard.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Spend some time apart, take time away from your phones, make a plan. Somebody leads the planning and somebody goes along for a ride. Maybe next time you switch it up, make yourself interesting, right? This is one of the things people forget, that in the beginning, when you meet somebody, you have interesting things to say about yourself.
Yeah.
The main key of sexual attraction is you're interesting. And then, of course, if you go on a date with your partner and you get into the car and you talk about who picks up the dog from the daycare or the kid from the daycare and who buys the milk and is the bill overdue, you are not doing anything to create interesting conversation or attraction. Right? So you have to have discipline. In my book, I call it date night discipline, right? Where you essentially park all what I call administrivia at home and you actually have interesting things to say to each other.
So what are some topics that would be, let's say we're out on a date night, what are some things to talk about that aren't administrative? Because I agree, that's what we talk about when we go out.
Yeah.
It's like kids, work, whatever's going on in the world. It's like all that stuff. So then what else is there to talk about?
Well, read some articles of something that you enjoy. One of the things that I do, which never fails, is I read Substack. Substack articles.
Oh yeah, I love Substack.
And essentially, there's endless stuff I don't know about. Right, that's
a great
really
idea.
interesting. And so I can come to a date, so to speak, and go. I just read this thing I never even knew. I went on a whole down a whole rabbit hole of researching these things. Did you know? Right. So it's like, and I do this a lot because I'm also naturally very curious. And so I can get like really into something and go fairly far into it and learn something. Right. And then I can bring that to my partner and I can go, here, look at this. Or I do it also sometimes with videos, things I see, save them for a time where I want to talk about something else that isn't same old, same old.
Yeah. the kids and the bills and the
Yeah.
finances and things
Yeah.
like
Well,
that. Yeah.
I don't have kids. I have dogs. Same.
Same thing.
Yes. So, so you can make yourself interesting. Also, part of making yourself interesting is that you have different interests, that you don't do everything together, that you have different interests, and that you can come from having attended to your different interests and bring the conversations and the learning and the invigoration from those interests to your partner. That's the optimal thing.
That's a really good point because some people might say, well, shouldn't we like everything the same? No, that makes it boring, right?
It's less of the erotic, right? Yeah, absolutely.
So we really can keep the intimacy alive over the years as time goes on. It's just going to look different than it does the first year. And does it change then going from year 1 to year 5 to year 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 years that you're with? I mean, the longer you're with someone, do you use the same strategies to keep that spark alive, to keep the intimacy alive, or does it change over time?
Well, I think these are big topics in the sense that I don't think any two couples are alike, right?
Right.
In the sense that how I slice it in my work with couples is that what I do on a regular basis is let's call it the renegotiation of purpose in the relationship, right?
Mhm.
And so what that means is that we can't assume that people stay aligned all the time.
Right.
It doesn't typically happen because most people are not clear about the purpose of a relationship when they go into it,
Mhm.
right? It's just assumed that if you love each other, then it's all going to work itself out. But as we well know, that is not true in even the slightest. You need to know where it's going. And
Yeah.
so in an ideal world, you know where it's going. And typically for a lot of people in the beginning, it's fun and having a sexy time and exploring. And then at some point, one or both people go, okay, well, maybe let's have children or let's build a business or a life together or however that looks, right? And then there comes a phase where it's actually not so much about the intimate relationship, but the building of a life
Yeah.
often. And
Yeah.
people don't understand that there's phases in relationship where you might not swing off the chandeliers, right, so to speak, because
Uh-huh.
you have a newborn, right, or you started a business or whatever, right?
Yep.
So I think desire and sex and all of those things come and go, and in a good relationship, that's accounted for and hopefully lines up,
Mm.
or at least can be discussed.
Mhm.
And then often there comes kind of a reinvigoration where the let's say the fuller and deeper human beings come back together in a recommitted way. And that happens a lot. I see this a lot in my clients where, there's a family building or business building, phase, and then there is a emptiness kind of a
Yes.
thing, often some version of that, right?
Yeah.
I have a couple, they've just sold a business at an insane amount of money after having literally built it from the ground up over 20 years. And
Wow.
they have massive emptiness. You know,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
they go
Wow.
in like 5 hours a week or something just to hand things over
Wow.
from having built the thing from scratch as a couple. And so, those are the moments where you go, okay, where we at? So intimacy changes, life changes, but the principles of creating intimacy are always the same. Make yourself interesting, work with, let's say, leading and following, meaning take turns, initiating activities, planning, take time away from your, everyday life, take time away from your devices, get back into your body.
Yeah.
And you can do that together. I had a really beautiful, let's say, role modeling in my family because my parents, without ever having known any of these things, right? Meaning they weren't experts in the field or anything,
Mhm.
but they were very committed to their relationship and they're still married and they're 84 now, 80,
Wow.
84. And they still have a very vibrant and alive and, beautiful relationship. So nobody's resigned, in my parents' relationship.
Mhm.
And one of the things they did when I grew up, I was, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Mhm.
My father had a very, very stressful job. And my mother was home raising us. And of course, as anybody who's ever done that knows, after you spend your entire day with two small children, who were both a handful, you're desperate for relief and adult attention, right?
True. Very true.
But my father, of course, also came home from an extremely demanding and stressful job. And so they had this really amazing system. I don't know how they figured it out. They don't remember, I've asked, but they just figured it out. Where when my dad would come home, he actually got half an hour in their bedroom by himself to de-escalate. And my mom essentially kept it together, so to speak, with us, still for that time.
Uh-huh.
And when I remember these things, we were old enough that we were, playing outside or whatever. But my dad had kind of a transition period. And in that transition period, my mother often would just hang out with him in the bedroom. And that was off limits for us. And then he'd come out and he'd be refreshed. They would have had a chance to connect as well.
Mm-hmm.
There was family time. We'd eat together and, things like that. And eventually we would go to bed and my parents would have time. But there was a transition that made it such that both of their needs were taken into account.
Wow.
A lot of, let's say, resentment there. And this sometimes worked not in my favor because I was notoriously bad in math, actually. It wasn't in school generally, but in math. And so my bad report cards would always be discussed in that half an hour, and I knew it was coming. But they had this buffer, right, where my dad didn't have to immediately go from one to the other.
Yeah.
And my alleviated, his transition some, but also got to transition out of only dealing with us to a more relational aspect. And that
I
worked
love that.
really well, yes. Yeah.
I mean, you think about your dad coming home and like being able to regulate his nervous system after being at work all day
yeah.
and reconnecting with your mom and taking that. I mean, how beautiful was that? I mean,
know,
and
right?
then coming out with the kids and
Yeah.
connecting when
Yeah.
he's regulated and he's more present and
Yeah.
all of those things.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And I benefited greatly from that in the sense that what I remember, and my nervous system remembers
Yeah.
just that really lovely having dinner together, hanging out together, going out in the summer, right? When everything happened out in the summer, Austria doesn't have, a lot of really great weather. So
Yeah.
you're walking, you're, with skiing, whatever, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think, as you can replicate such things, they're really good for the nervous system. And as a couple, that's why I'm saying it doesn't look the same for every couple, but as a
Right.
couple, I think the emphasis has to be on the regulating of the nervous system. And then that leads to intimacy and sex. You can learn all the sex tricks, not trips, but tricks in the world. If your nervous system isn't up for it, it's not going to land.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're not embodied, your nervous system's not regulated, all those things. I just want to hear out of your mouth, please, that relationships take work and it's not a bad thing.
Yes.
You do agree.
I agree 100%. And
Yeah.
I also want to say that I think if we don't look at it as work, but as upkeep or maintenance.
Yeah. I don't like the word work. Effort. How about that?
Yeah. Or
You have to
upkeep
put
or
effort in, right?
maintenance.
Yeah. Effort. Yeah. Upkeep,
Because
effort,
the
something
thing
like
is,
that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You and I don't expect our hair. Well, my hair is a mess because I just came off a plane, but we don't expect our hair to look like this without work. Right.
Right. Right. It takes a little effort, right?
Effort. It has to be washed. It has to be dried. It has to be colored.
Exactly.
It has to be blow dried, right? Like you have to do stuff for
Yeah.
your body, for the body to support you. And if you think of your partner as the body, right, as your
Yeah.
body and their body, and
Yeah.
you start tending to the body of the relationship the same way that you tend to your body, and your partner tends to their body, hopefully, then it's taken out of, oh God, this should be, magically we should have great
Yeah.
sexual attraction. No, you won't after, the initial cocktail of newness and neurotransmitters, right, and hormones. But that's not a bad thing. I mean, you're not looking at your body and going, well, my body should effortlessly maintain its weight without me doing anything. My hair should effortlessly
Oh God, no.
curl without doing anything, right? You would
Love
never
that.
think such thing, but somehow we go, well, our relationship should be easy. If it's not easy, it's no good. No.
No. No, 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 no.
Also, we change and our partners change, and this is not a static situation under any circumstances.
I have one more question for you. What's the most important quality? How do I say? I want to ask this in the right way. What's the most important thing that we should be focusing on if we are in relationship with another human to keep that relationship healthy and alive? And again, healthy intimacy, all the things. What's the one thing that we can focus on?
Generosity.
Oh, I did not think you were going to say that.
There's actually studies done on that by now, that the number one key marker of relationship is what I call generosity or consideration. And so I once said this to a client of mine in London, and he said, what do you mean generosity? Tiffany's? Cards? and no, generosity of heart. And generosity of heart is a combination of things. It is having consideration for your partner, you know, and considering them in addition to considering yourself. And that goes as simple as when you grab yourself a glass of water from the kitchen, bring your partner one. You know, things of that nature. So simple acts of looking out for your partner.
Kindness,
but also benefit of the doubt.
yeah,
Generosity of spirit, in the sense that you assume your partner wants to do well by you. That's what you assume unless proven otherwise. Also alleviating, heavy workload when possible, giving praise, right? I mean,
yes,
any relationship workshop I teach has an entire segment on how to give and receive praise, because it's so important.
yeah.
We don't do it nearly enough, and praise is the most generous gift you can give your partner.
I agree with you right there. Appreciation, praise, all those things. Thank you for this so much today. I could go on and on, but where would people find you if they want to learn more?
Well, I'm assuming you will post my website, Michaela.
Absolutely, yes. Give it to me. What is the website?
It's my website, michaelaboehm.com. So it's MichaelaBoehm, like Mary.com.
Got it.
I'm assuming you'll put it in the show
Yeah,
notes.
I'm going to put it right in the show notes for you.
And on there are free resources. There's quizzes. There is podcasts, with excerpts from my teaching Q&As. There is on-demand courses, toolkits. There's workshops, retreats. I teach something called
Everything.
boot camp. Yeah, so there's all kinds of stuff on there. Free, low-cost, self-study, all the way to teaching. I teach people how to facilitate my body of work, both in the intimacy, attraction domain, as well as the nonlinear movement. Teacher training, how to facilitate women's circles. So I have practitioner programs since I've been actively a teacher for 20-something years. So, yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to add all of this to the show notes. And thank you so much for today. It was incredible.
You are very welcome.